Mini episode 810 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FDH Lounge / the FantasyDraftHelp.com Insider. We are here as we do every year. It's the 2017 NASCAR season preview. We're doing it in the form of our fantasy mock draft. Rick Morris coming at you with our motorsports editor here at FDH, Mike Petak. A pleasure as always. Thank you for hosting the draft here at your humble abode, Mike. A pleasure as always, my friend.
Good to have you, and welcome to Casa de Petak.
It is always a pleasure to be at the fine Casa de Petak, and we have a lot of interesting things to look forward to in the 2017 season.
It's not going to be boring, I can guarantee you that.
Yes, a lot of rules changes coming into this season here, and I have to say that on the FDH board, we really didn't try to take them into account that much because it's very, very difficult to try to get your arms around that. Yes, I guess you could say drivers that have shown more consistency the last couple of years are more poised to do well in this format, but it's going to change the behavioral patterns of drivers who didn't race as aggressively and who kind of hung back. And you and I talked about this a little bit off air, where I think this could really kind of verge into irresponsibility is when you start getting into the restrictor plate tracks like Talladega, and that a lot of times drivers hang back, and that keeps bad situations from being worse. But this whole thing here of we want everyone to be aggressive at all costs, I do sort of fear what the human toll of that thing might be, Mike, that based on everybody being incentivized to be super aggressive no matter what.
I agree, and I think really the best thing to do would be just to get rid of the restrictor plates and may the best man win. But that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
That's probably the safest thing to do.
I've heard that theory before. That's very interesting, and you know more about this than I do, certainly. But, yeah, it has some real logic to it. I know that, again, you and I are doing the mock draft. I am also drafting for FDH Lounge dignitary Nate Noy. He wants to go right off of the FDH draft board, so we're doing that. And I have lists from our fellow FDH Lounge dignitaries, Matt Petrone and Anthony Petrone. Matt, our defending champion. Anthony, who finished in last place a year ago. So the Petrones bookended us on this thing here. Just had to get that in there. It's obligatory.
What's up, Petrones?
Yes, and Anthony, I will say this.
I like your tequila.
I go back to this thing a couple of years ago when we got together when we were doing, it was a Pantheon segment, and it is a large group of FDH Lounge dignitaries. So some of these guys have never met some of these other guys. And Tim Faust, one of our original dignitaries that we don't get together with that much anymore, he happened to be there. And the Patrones really weren't kind of on his radar. So when he was asking me who was likely to be joining us that day, I rattled off the names, and he said, the Petrone brothers, is that a nickname based on drinking? I said, well, if it was based on the classiness of their drinking, they'd be the Smirnoff brothers. But Anthony Petrone did try to take this into account on his draft board. And I take my hat off to him. That's more than I was willing to try to do, because you could be more accurate if you try to anticipate. And, of course, the major things we're talking about here this year, dividing up every race into 3 stages, awarding points to the winners of every stage, as well as obviously points for winning the race itself. And winning the race itself is always going to be the most important thing here points-wise. But changing up the points, trying to, again, incentivize drivers to be more proactive, more towards the front of the pack. Don't hang back there as much, because each stage is only a third of the race, and you got to be up there to try to make any hay for that to be a situation, to try to be competitive all the time, and quite frankly to try to hook in the TV audience a little bit more. And the NASCAR people were very forthright about admitting that when they unveiled the new system, and basically said, this was their analysis, that hockey has 3 periods, football and basketball have 4 quarters. This is a way of sort of dividing it up here so that people can tune in and catch parts of it. It almost sounds a little bit kind of defeatist on the whole thing of like, well, you're not convincing people to sit through your entire race based on the ratings. So it sounds like they're sort of taking what they can get if people want to take a more piecemeal approach and say, I'll watch this stage of this race.
Yeah, agreed. And they're also making some points races at Daytona other than the 500.
That's right. That's right. Making that part of the whole system here. So Speed Week's going to factor into this as well. And again, on our system, we go off of the NASCAR points every year, and then, again, incentives for drivers who finish in the top 5 of the standings a year ago. And Matt, again, did very well with his picks last year, and he was very fortunate to draw the number 1 pick. We did a draw off air here, so the order that we're going, 6-round serpentine draft, as we generally do. Matt is number 1. You're picking second, Mike. Anthony Petrone is third. I, Rick Morris, am fourth. Nate Noy is fifth. So we'll make those picks. We'll circle back around. And we were able to get as far as the order of this thing goes, because I'm going off of lists from Matt and Anthony, and myself going off of the FDH draft board, as is Nate Noy. You happen to let me know what your preference would be in the first round. We're already 8 picks into this thing before we even turn the mics on, so we're off to a running start here. We can kind of analyze where we're going and get your thoughts. And certainly, you want to check out people, because Mike's thoughts from this always factor in very heavily every year. 2017 Fantasy Racing Draftology. You can find that pretty shortly up on fantasydrafthelp.com. So we will be sort of encapsulating some of Mike's thoughts on the drivers as we go through here, taking that in the form of his notes for that. The first driver to go off of the board was Matt Petrone, taking Jimmy Johnson, number 1, in a way that is, for a lot of people, maybe from a more casual perspective, and I don't mean to be insulting, because Matt is anything but casual. He's our defending champion. But a lot of people would just say, well, duh, he's the chalk pick. He won it a year ago. But 10th in 2015 in the standings, 11th in 2014. When you start looking at the other numbers that you can find on the FDH draft board by track type, it really kind of gets a little bit more thin from there. Only 8th on the intermediate courses a year ago as far as average finish. We're taking average finish for all of these. 18th on the restrictor plates, first on the short tracks, not in the top 20 for finishes on the super speedways and on the road races. So Jimmy Johnson is a strong candidate. He's always going to be there at the end. Clearly, Matt is gambling heavily on getting a first or second place bonus from him, because if you're just looking at it through the course of a season, 2015 and 2014 tell the case. That's sort of the worst case scenario for him, in which case this pick would be a flop. So it sort of seems like for a guy who's who's won this as many times as he has, he's still kind of high risk, high reward at number 1, is he not?
He is, but again, Jimmy Johnson is just clutch.
Mm-hmm.
He always is going to find his way in the end, but it's everything leading up to that.
Right.
He was not a chalk number 1 seed going into the chase last year,
mm-hmm.
but he won it, and you can't fault Matt for saying, "Look, I want the defending champ number 1."
Right. Yeah, I can't fault that at all. I mean, that's a strong pick for what he brings to you, for his chance to close it out in the end there, and we shall see.
He definitely knows how to win.
He certainly does. Now, for you, Mike, the second pick overall, I was a little bit kind of disappointed, because I looked at Anthony's draft board, and I knew that this guy was going to slip to me if he slipped past you, but it didn't happen. You're going with the number 1 guy on the FDH draft board this year, unsurprisingly.
Kyle Busch.
Yeah.
Something you talking about somebody who drives aggressively?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that Kyle Busch is just that guy. Now we'll see how this, again with the new point system, how this is all going to work. But the guy just knows how to win races.
He does,
and wins are the most important thing. And taking Kyle Busch at number 2, it was not even a second thought when I saw Jimmy Johnson went off the board at number 1.
I can understand that. He finished 3rd a year ago, so he was right up there. He raced last year as the defending champion from 2015. He finished 10th in 2014, 4th on the intermediate tracks last year, and that's the most important one, because that's 2/3 of the races right there. It's most important that you can hit those ones well. From there, first on the restrictor plates, 14th on the short tracks, 3rd on the super speedways, 4th on the road races. More than most other drivers, he was strong across the board, Mike.
Very much so. Very much so. And coming back off that injury, and just being aggressive is in his nature. So hopefully this plays right into his wheelhouse.
We'll see how it goes, because the third pick here, Anthony Petrone gets the guy who's number 1 on his draft board. He was actually number 9 on the FDH draft board. And again, the top 9 drivers or so are bunched up pretty well. We have a cutoff after the top 5 and then a cutoff after 9. So Truex is going to go this high in some drafts this year. Martin Truex, the pick. Anthony is looking for a breakthrough for him. Driver who finished 11th a year ago, 4th in 2015, did not make the chase in 2014 with a 24th place finish. And again, on different track types last year, was really kind of hit or miss. He was 11th on the intermediate course races, 16th on the restrictor plates, 8th on the short tracks, 18th on the super speedways, and 3rd on the road races. So he's a guy where Anthony put him first. I talked about this, that his draft board prioritizes consistency and drivers that he sees as not having to make very big adjustments to the new rules based on how they've done it before. So from Anthony's perspective, Martin Truex is a driver who is set up to win his first championship here under new rules that really kind of suit him.
Martin Truex, would I have taken him at number 3? No. Do I like Martin Truex as a driver? Absolutely, 100%. Looking at ahead, Anthony is taking up my mantra of team upside.
Yeah.
They're working with Gibbs Racing, and I think that's what really helped out Truex last year a lot. So, again, people like who they like, and he's trying to adjust his draft board to be, with the new rules. We'll see what happens. It's so hard right now. Mm-hmm. But do I like Martin Truex as a driver? Absolutely.
Yeah, how do you not? I mean, he's got a lot of upside. And as far as being a relatively young guy still who hasn't been able to get it done yet, that takes me to my pick, the 4th pick overall. I don't get the top guy on the FDH draft board at number 4, but I do get the number 2 guy, and that is Joey Logano, who, for what it's worth, finished 2nd in UQB last year. Our UQB stat basically takes into account all of the different track types and weighting them proportionately. Where we're kind of fortunate in that regard is that everything is divisible of 36. It's nice the way they have it with the 24 intermediate tracks on down the line. Everything divides into 36, and it makes for some nice, clean math. Joey Logano, another driver that was strong across the board last year. He was the runner-up in the series. He was 6th in 2015. He was 4th in 2014. So over a 3-year stretch, you're not going to find anybody who's really done it better than him. 6th on the intermediates last year, 2nd on restrictor plates, tied for 3rd on the short track, 2nd on the super speedways, 2nd on the road races. Joey Logano, I'm the kind of guy here where I like upside as much as the next guy. I might perhaps prefer to be able to get somebody who has done it before, who's won it before, but I'm not in that spot. Like Anthony, I'm gambling that this is going to be the breakthrough year for Joey Logano.
Oh, there's no breakthrough year. He's won plenty of races, plenty of top 5s, plenty of top 10s. He was the one.
Right.
That if Kyle Busch wasn't there, I would have, and he was still under consideration with Kyle Busch on the board.
Right.
That's how much I like Joey Logano.
Right.
And he works so well with Keselowski as his teammate that I've always kind of been a huge Joey guy ever since he went over to Penske.
Yeah, I can understand that. And your point is very well taken. That when you look at the consistency of the last couple of years, that it is a situation where that kind of plays out the wrong way. It's funny. You're looking here at our sheet. I had made a mistake looking ahead here. I had written down a name twice. So when we get to this with my 2nd round pick, I guess I apparently returned the favor as far as sniping you.
Oh.
We'll
Damn
get to that.
I had like drool coming down my face. I'm like, oh my god, this is so good.
I had a driver written in twice, and I'm glad I caught that before we got to it on air because it would have been embarrassing. Although that's actually going to be the next pick here because that's where Nate is at this point in time. Nate is on the board to end the first round and start the second round, and unsurprisingly, with him going off of the FDH draft board, he sniped me of the guy I wanted. I guess we pass it along here and return the favor. I'm going to snipe you of the guy that you want. He takes Kevin Harvick with his first pick. I actually had Kevin Harvick then written in for myself second round here, so that was where my misprint, not catching that before we turned the mics on, kind of got in the way. Kevin Harvick and then Brad Keselowski are his two picks. So again, a lot of times in a draft like this, serpentine style, you get a team where, particularly with the way it's bunched up at the top, a lot of times, and this is sort of counterintuitively, sometimes the team that drafts at the end of the first round will be in the best spot because, like, the team that drafts first will also be drafting 10th, et cetera, et cetera. The guy drafting 5th and 6th, he gets some value for Harvick and Keselowski here with the 5th and 6th picks overall because we've got them 3rd and 5th on our draft board. So your thoughts on Harvick and Keselowski for Nate?
That's great. I'd love to be in Nate's shoes right now. Those are two solid picks.
Yeah.
They're
both
above solid.
They're both very, very consistent. They both know what it means to be a series champion. Harvick was he actually led the UQB last year, 184 points off of that, and that makes sense because of the strength that he had almost across the board. First on the intermediate tracks, and that is, again, 2/3 of the tracks. You're going to be very high on the UQB when you do well on that. 4th on the restrictor plate, 2nd on the short tracks, 14th on the super speedways, tied for 17th on the road courses. Keselowski, 3rd on intermediate, 9th restrictor plate, tied for 6th short track, 11th super speedway, tied for 5th on the road courses. And in the point standings, Harvick, 8th, 2nd, and 1st the last couple of years. The last 3 years for Keselowski, 12th, 7th, and 5th. Two guys who, again, strong across the board and have that winning experience that, like I said, all things being equal, I would have liked to have had with my first pick here. It didn't work out that way, but Nate gets two guys who've been in the winner's circle at the end of the season.
Yep, great. Two great picks. I mean, that's just shows you the depth that we have at the top of this draft.
That's right. To be able to get two guys in there like that. That brings me to the second pick of the second round. That was where I ended up taking Matt Kenseth because, again, like a moron, I had Kevin Harvick written down for myself, even though I wrote it down for Nate. And then as I'm crossing out Harvick, that was what led to that spontaneous moment here on air a minute ago here when you saw me writing down Kenseth. I end up snaking you with that pick. Kenseth, a guy who finished 5th last year, 15th in 2015, 7th in 2014. On the UQB last year, he was 7th with 134 points. That's indicative of 2nd on the intermediate tracks. Again, very important right there. 11th on the restrictor plate courses, not in the top 20 short tracks or super speedways, but again, short tracks only account for 6 races, super speedways account for 4. He was 13th on the road track races last year, albeit, again, that's only 2 races. So a guy who in 30 of the 36 races last year was top 11 or better as far as average finish. And again, he was 2nd on the 24 races collectively that formed the intermediate tracks and 11th on the 6 restrictor plate courses. So he's strong in the areas where he needed to be strong the most.
Just call him Mr. Consistency.
Yep.
That's, Matty Ice.
Mm-hmm.
Not the quarterback for the Falcons.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the driver of the number 20 car. Just Mr. Consistency. Smart driver. He doesn't take any crazy risks out there. And he just finds his way to the front of the pack.
And strangely enough, albeit in ways that I don't think he would necessarily find flattering, but one of the most influential athletes of the 21st century, because you go back to, I think 2003 when he won, and it was deemed to be so boring by NASCAR and the way that it happened. His boring kind of march, his anticlimactic march to the title was why we got the chase. And then other sports start imitating it. You get the FedEx Cup in golf. You get NHRA doing the same thing here. NASCAR has tweaked it multiple times, not least of which, again, this year, as we talked about here. So it all came from the dawn of that back in 2003, and one of the last times that NASCAR was going into a little bit of kind of a panic, like, what are we going to do? We got to juice it up a little bit more. The lasting legacy of Matt Kenseth, ladies and gentlemen, maybe not the one that he prefers.
Probably not even close. He'll be remembered for that and his love of Brad Keselowski.
Yes. And they end up not going to the same team here. We end up not getting the chemistry in our fantasy draft with those guys. But we catch up now to everything we were able to write down off air based on the lists that we have here. So the last one that I have written in as we're speaking right now, Anthony Petrone getting the guy who was number 3 on his draft board, getting the guy who was number 11 on the FDH draft board. You talk about team upside. Anthony is doubling down on that like a mofo. Chase Elliott, who was 11th, he was 10th in the standings last year. Was a Chase competitor in his first time of going out there for real and getting it done. He was 13th on the UQB with 89 points in that, and kind of a mixed bag. 10th on the intermediate tracks, not in the top 20 on restrictor plate tracks, tied for 10th on the short tracks, tied for 19th on the super speedways, tied for 14th on the road tracks. Chase Elliott is a guy who, again, has a world of promise, has that incredible lineage, the bloodlines, and again, along with Martin Truex, team upside probably more so than anybody we've seen to this point.
Absolutely. He does have the bloodline, and he performed very well driving the 24 car last year for the very first time in what's now Monster Energy.
Yes.
So, if Anthony hits on these, he's just, he can run away with the league just with these 2 picks because, they're both excellent drivers. I think you and I can agree that they're just coming a little early.
Yeah.
Nothing against the drivers, nothing against Anthony and his picks. Like I says, if he hits, and, there's no reason why they can't.
Well, if Chase Elliott can handle the pressure of driving the number 24 car, then maybe he can handle the pressure of, in my estimation, maybe being overdrafted a little bit here in the number 8 spot overall. Again, 3rd on Anthony's draft board. So Anthony got the 1st and 3rd guys on his list, and he was really trying to take this into account more than anybody as far as anticipating the rules here this year. If he gambled correctly in slanting his board that way, he's going to be in great shape, and he's going to be the team to beat if he was right because he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Absolutely,
so
yes.
It's very funny because we talk about this year, the chemistry of 2 very young guys that Anthony has there, 2 young upside guys, the chemistry that was missed of Kenseth and Keselowski not going to the same team in the league here. You have a chance for some very interesting chemistry here with your next pick because if you're strictly going off of the FDH board, then and we are doing that. Okay.
Yes, we are.
Well, and you know what? It's so funny with you taking Kurt Busch here to go with Kyle Busch because Anthony has said to me, I've told him the joke about the Petrone brothers, the Smirnoff brothers. Well, here's the thing, too. Those guys aren't really into vodka or whatever. They're more so into beer. Anthony has said we would definitely be the Busch brothers if it was based on the classiness of what we imbibe. So instead, you actually get the Busch brothers here. I can't believe I get to tell that Petrone brothers joke in the course of a draft, but such is life. Kurt Busch up next, a guy who was a series champion, albeit a while ago. We've been waiting for number 2 for a while, but he finished 7th last year, 8th in 2015, 12th in 2014. He was 5th on the UQB last year, taking into account the track types. Not surprising when you look at the consistency across the board here. 5th on both intermediate and restrictor plate course finishes last year. 4th on the super speedways, 8th on the road courses, 14th on the 6 short track races last year. A tie for 14th, actually, is about as low as it got. So somebody who was very consistent, who was very strong in those areas here. And again, the chemistry, perhaps, of getting 2 brothers here, 2 guys sharing that bloodline, probably can't be underestimated. So a very, very interesting pick, Mike.
No, not at all. I've always been kind of a Kurt Busch mark. And the thing about Harvick and Busch is working when they were with Stewart Haas. I believe this is the first year they've gone to Ford.
I think so.
But this is the team that Ford is putting all their money behind. It is what Hendrick is to Chevy. Ford was looking for that young team, that newer team to push their brand. Mm-hmm. And they're going to put a lot of money and a lot of technology behind this team. And it could take a while for it to come to fruition, or it could be a home run right off the bat.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of don't know how it's going to shake out. And I feel like this is the point in time, because this is where probably for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years maybe he might go a little bit higher. He probably wouldn't go a little bit lower. But this is right about where Carl Edwards, I think, has gone in our drafts the last couple of years. So there was some real refiguring that had to go on our part late in the game here, and with a lot of people, with him dropping out very, very surprisingly as he did.
Stunning. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I still don't. I think there's more to it than meets the eye, and maybe someday we'll get that. But yeah, I was really surprised, retiring so young and without a championship.
Right. Yeah, and that's a guy where, and I've brought this up, that he is a guy who I think two different people picked in 2012. One of the things we do with the FDH Lounge is our February 29th time capsule, and try to make predictions for when we open up the time capsule the next February 29th. And I think there were two different people who said he will win 2 NASCAR Series titles before February 29th, 2016, and it certainly didn't seem like it was an odd pick at the time. He's one of the guys you would have thought of in that regard for that. Jimmy Johnson, probably the chalk guy, because more of his 5 titles at the time were more recently in the memory, but he's a guy who seemed like he was just going to do it one of these years, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And his career is disappointing in that way, albeit he accomplished a lot. But I don't know. I don't know if the expectations were unfair. They often are with a lot of guys. I mean, there are people that will tell you that even LeBron James, when it's all said and done, won't have lived up to everything they thought when he came out of high school. So expectations sometimes are a real bitch, but what do you think it was with Carl Edwards with the course of his career? It's just one of these enigmas, I think.
I don't know. I wonder if it was a pressure thing, because when he left Roush Fenway, he was quote-unquote the face of Ford. He was the face of Ford. Then he went over to Toyota, and Gibbs had a super team put together there. And, yeah, he was winning races, but he wasn't winning the championships. And I'm wondering if the pressure just got to him.
Very
Some
strange.
people don't handle pressure very well.
Yeah, you don't know how it would have gone. And I will always be curious to know, certainly this is something I'm going to inquire of Matt Patrone after the draft, is where he would have slotted him in, because he ends up making 2 picks, one in particular that is very much off the FDH board. And I don't know his reasoning. I actually just got his draft board texted to me before showtime here without any kind of explanation as to why he slotted guys where he did. The guy that he's getting, who's number 8 on his draft board, he is taking with the 10th overall pick at the end of the second round, is 25th actually on the FDH draft board, Ty Dillon. So he is going for, you talk about going for young upside, and you talk about how Anthony kind of rolled the dice on Truex and Elliott to the extent that he did. That's nothing compared to Matt taking this risk here with Ty Dillon and hoping it's going to pay off at the end of round 2.
Yeah, he could have got him a round later easier,
yeah.
I believe.
Well, he starts off the 3rd round, so I can guarantee you he could have done that.
Well, okay. How about the 4th round?
4th round, very possibly. Yeah, I think so. 4th/5th.
But here's the thing. If you like a guy and your gut tells you that this is the guy you want and you don't think he's going to be there the next time around, grab him.
Here's the thing, though, and I think you'd agree with me on this. I think you would agree with me as far as approach to this, because you and I both really value the concept of value, which is what we talk about all the time with FantasyDraftHelp.com. If you do it, you better be right. If you're going to go against the grain, you better be right. And this is one of these ones where, again, if it hits, he's going to look like a genius. If it doesn't hit, we're all going to be sitting there going, what was up with that, bro?
Yeah, true. But again, like we've always talked about, if there's a guy out there that you like and you don't think he may be there at the next time around, because he's back at the top of the draft and he's basically got 10 guys before his next pick.
Yeah.
If you don't think he's going to be there and you like him that much, go for it.
Well, I don't think he had seen the FDH draft board because, again, it's not posted publicly and won't be until the entire draft guide is out. I'm looking at Anthony's team. Anthony had him slotted 16th. Matt had him 25th. So the three of us that are going strongly or entirely off the FDH draft board, me, you, and Nate, we wouldn't have taken him before then. Anthony, it'll be kind of a coin flip, and to me that's something to keep an eye on, is whether Ty Dillon would have been the highest available guy for Anthony. He won't be in the third round, whether he would have been in the fourth round. That one there, kind of a gamble. The next one, much closer to value on the FDH draft board, I would say, as we start off the third round. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is the pick for Matt. And again, this is probably more or less where he's gone the last couple of years. He was 9th last year in UQB, and that was paced in large part by finishing 9th on the intermediate tracks last year, tied for 3rd on the short tracks, not in the top 20 average finish for restrictor plate, super speedway, or road courses. Dale Earnhardt Jr. last year with the concussion issues, finishing 32nd. I actually had him last year, and that was one of the things that kept me from making a stronger run at this thing. He was 12th in 2015, 8th in 2014. So he's been a guy who's been right about in that range any number of years. And you go back to everything about Carl Edwards and the prodigy and the guy who was expected to be the guy. And some of the other guys we've talked about here, too, with Chase Elliott in terms of bloodlines and expectations. Nobody has ever had greater expectations based on bloodlines than Dale Earnhardt Jr. So when we talk about Carl Edwards' career as being kind of enigmatic, of he fell short of what he was supposed to be, but maybe not by much. If he had even one championship, he'd be pretty close to it. For Dale Earnhardt Jr., with all due respect, the gap between what he was thought to be when he started and where he's at right now is kind of wide.
It's huge, and here's the thing. We talked about this off the air as well. Can people live up to expectations?
Mm-hmm.
There is no way that Dale Earnhardt Jr. could have lived up to expectations, what people were thinking.
Right.
Impossible.
Right.
But he has fallen so far short.
Yeah.
Obviously, the problems with his stepmother.
Mm-hmm.
And when he first signed with Hendrick, everybody's like, okay, let me start counting the titles this guy's going to win.
Yeah, that was the thought.
And it never happened. It never came to fruition. And now, last year with the concussion, he missed so many races. He's saying all the right things this year, but my question is Dale Earnhardt Jr. going to finish out the year? And if he doesn't, how soon till he's an owner in NASCAR?
Could be. It depends on, and I have read some things where he's talked about how the concussion has.
Yeah, he got married.
Yeah, he got married, so his approach to things has kind of been a little bit kind of changed, and that's one of those things here too of like, if you get to the point, and a lot of times and this happens with athletes, of where they can get to the point and they can accept what their career has been, because he's already at the point, and this is one of these things here too, where it's kind of deceiving as far as how we look at guys, and he'll always, in a lot of ways, be like the young guy who came in and whatever, and it's like he's already at the point now where if he won it this year, which would be unlikely, or next year or whatever, then he's like the sentimental late career favorite guy who finally broke through. He was supposed to be the prodigy who'd win a bunch of them, and instead he's like Jim Plunkett winning the Super Bowl with the Raiders on the back nine of his career. I mean, it's just weird how it's deceiving how we think of people.
Yeah. Well, let me run this by you.
Yeah.
Hall of Famer, yes or no?
That's a good question. You have a better handle than I do, because every sport sets the bar differently. Football is very punishing. Like, Art Monk didn't make it for the longest time, where people were just like, what the hell's wrong with this? So it's like, I'm not as familiar with the bar for NASCAR as you are.
It's still relatively new. It's really in its infancy.
Okay. I mean, if it's a thing of where if you're one of the top drivers of your generation, if that's the cutoff point, then you make it. But if it's like in football, it seems to be you better have been the elite of all time at your position. And if you weren't, good luck, buddy. No, he's not an elite all-time driver. He's one of the best of his generation. I'm going to guess that's probably the measuring stick, so I'm going to guess the answer is yes. What do you think?
I say yes, but I think it's because of his last name.
Could be. Well, and let's face it, too. There's a lot of showbiz stuff that goes with this stuff. NASCAR more so than the other sports as far as sort of being privately held and everything like that, as far as how important marketing is to it and the sponsorships and whatever. So you know what? If we're just looking at the realpolitik of money talks, that makes me even more convinced that you're right. Because from a business perspective, it's a no-brainer that he goes in the Hall of Fame. It just depends on how important is that consideration.
Yeah, or, like I says, I honestly believe he's going to be an owner.
Yeah.
And he could go in as an owner.
He could. He very possibly. Wouldn't that be something?
Because I really think he's got the smarts.
Yeah. Well, you know, you talk about...
and the name Earnhardt's going to bring you money no matter what.
Right. And wouldn't that be something, too, that he joined the top team a couple of years ago as a driver, but wouldn't it be something of like he was always... Sometimes you get this with people in sports, of they don't break through in the area that you expect, but it's like, what if he ends up becoming the top owner 10, 15 years from now, and a dominant owner and everything like that? Wouldn't that be something? Like the guy who was supposed to do it as a driver may yet do it as an owner.
Yeah, same with Richard Childress.
Yeah, that's true.
So...
That's true. You know, he could break through in that way. But Matt's got him here in this spot, starting off the...
That was some great talk, by the way. I really enjoyed that.
That was a nice little riff there. That's why I always enjoy doing these with you. Let's reset the top two rounds here as we go through. First round was Jimmy Johnson, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., Joey Logano, Kevin Harvick. Second round, Brad Keselowski, Matt Kenseth, Chase Elliott, Kurt Busch, Ty Dillon, Dale Earnhardt Jr. to start the third round. The only big surprise to this point, I think, Ty Dillon. Maybe a mild surprise with Anthony's two picks, but nothing in regards to the roll of the dice that Matt did with Ty Dillon. For as much as we've said with Jimmy Johnson in the first pick overall, somewhat boom or bust in the top spot. Ty Dillon way more so with the second spot, and a pick that is going to make or break his draft. I think that much is clear before he even rounds out with his last three picks. We come to you for the third round here, Mike. You've got the Busch brothers here, and you're going to have to go in a different direction here because I don't believe Mrs. Busch crapped out a third kid who's on the NASCAR circuit.
Well, Kyle's just had a baby, so...
this is not a keeper league.
Well... I think I may have to go with the defending Daytona 500 champion.
Okay.
Denny Hamlin.
Denny Hamlin. Always a guy who is in an interesting spot coming into
Always. He's a boomer bust guy, you know. Everybody there for years, he was the guy. He was the next guy to break through that glass ceiling and win the championship.
There's been a couple of these guys, and that I think when we look back at this historically, we will sort of finger them as the primary victims of Jimmy Johnson winning as many titles as he did, because there have been guys that have been frozen out because of that. And certainly I think you could make a case for Hamlin in that group. The last 3 years, very consistent, 6th, 9th, and 3rd back over the last 3 years in terms of series finishes. And very consistent last year in terms of how he did. You're getting incredible recent consistency anyways. For this pick. 7th on the intermediate courses last year, tied for 7th on restrictor plates, 5th on short tracks, 7th on super speedways, and 1st on the road courses last year. When you look at it, there were no holes in the game of Denny Hamlin.
No, you can say that about a lot of guys on Gibbs Racing.
Yeah.
They were all consistent.
Well, one less guy than we could have said it about at this time a year ago, as we just covered.
Yes, true.
But, yeah, I mean, Hamlin is a guy who, again, what are your thoughts on him being, I mean, not at this point a late career guy, but it's certainly at this point what we would consider a breakthrough guy if he wins the title. What would you think about that at this point?
See, right now I think there's less pressure on him because of who his teammates are.
Okay, could be.
And so that could make him, you know, and from what I understand about Gibbs, they all share information with each other, and none of it is begrudgingly. I hear with some of these teams, like, yeah, they'll give you the information, but not quite all of it.
Right.
So I hear that they're really open with their conversations with each other, and they help each other out. And, you know, again, is he a late bloomer? Possibly. And but like you say, I'm getting good value and a lot of consistency. He doesn't get the press that Matt Kenseth gets because Kenseth does have a championship under his belt.
Right.
But his numbers are just as consistent.
Right. And that is certainly the case because he is a guy who can get it done in a lot of different types of scenarios, and that is something that you have to place a lot of value on. The next pick that gets made is an interesting one here. Another young guy here for Anthony Petrone, and a pick where there's a decent amount of value to this one. We had him slotted 14th on our draft board. He had him slotted 8th. And interestingly enough, Matt Petrone had him slotted 13th. So he was a little closer to the FDH board. But Eric Jones is the pick, this young man, for Anthony Petrone. And not much to look at here as far as NASCAR history, at least at the major level. What I haven't referenced a whole lot to this point here, because our picks, we only have a couple picks that really strongly go against the consensus this year of our experts draft board that we do in all the sports, where we average out some of our leading peers in the industry. For him, that's really the only thing to kind of point to. He was tied for 14th on the experts draft board. We got him slotted 14th, so we're pretty much chalk. Anthony takes him 13th, so fairly uncontroversial, albeit, again, and this is one of the things about going off of a list, though, is that you do not have the ability to mix it up as you go. And I'm not going to compare his level of experience to Martin Truex Jr. and Chase Elliott, because they have more. Elliott by a smaller amount, to be sure. But three very young guys. When you're talking about boom or bust type teams, Anthony's already looking like that.
Yeah, he is. And man, very young, very I mean, yes, Truex has got more experience than Chase and Eric Jones probably do have together, but Anthony's set in his ways. He's very strong-willed.
Yes, he is.
So, and I like Anthony. So, I hope this all works out for him.
And you and I were.
I hope he finishes a solid second behind me.
We were referencing this off air of an incident that, like, I can laugh about it now. But you talk about being strong-willed. I think it was either 2 or 3 years ago. He strongly disagreed with us having. I think we had Kyle Busch #1 on our draft board, and he thought it should have been Harvick because it was the year after Harvick won, so it would have been the 2015 board. And just berating me. We were at a group dinner before the Boku show at the Roxino here in town here. And me just like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. And he's getting in my face, and it was just like very, very tense. So you talk about being set in his ways. I would have classified him as being a real a-hole on that occasion. But we love you, Anthony. That's being passionate is something that a lot of us are as far as how we view these things. But Eric Jones is going to be his pick. I will not berate him for that. That's decent value.
That's where everybody has him slotted.
More or less. And my next pick, actually, it's funny because he was 10th on the experts draft board, 12th on the FDH draft board, and I'm getting him 14th. So this, by all measures, would be a value pick. Kyle Larson, who finished 9th a year ago, he was 10th in UQB, 13th on the intermediate tracks, 6th on the restrictor plate courses, 13th on short tracks, tied for 5th on super speedways, 20th on the road courses. Kyle Larson, a young guy who I am pairing with Kenseth and Logano. So I have one of the more diverse mixes thus far, I would say, of youth and experience. Yeah. But Larson is at the low end of the spectrum for me for experience, but I think has a good amount of upside here in the late third round, if I do say so myself.
Am I allowed to pun here, right?
Go ahead.
That's grand larceny right there.
Nice. So you agree with that, then?
Yeah.
You think it's good value?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
All right. What are some of the things you like about his game?
I like it. This is his third year racing with the big boys, and he's learned a lot. And it takes the first year you're as a rookie, a lot of people aren't going to work with you.
Right.
Even sometimes your own teammates are. You got that yellow stripe along your back bumper, and people see that and they get nervous.
Right.
Okay. He came close a couple of times to getting his first win. Here's my strong. I'm going to tell you right now.
Okay.
You're going to get at least one win out of Kyle Larson.
Okay, that wouldn't surprise me.
There's not going on much of a limb there, but there's my guarantee for you.
Okay.
And if you can get a win out of your was he fourth round pick?
Third round pick.
For a third round pick, you're going to get a win. That means one win, you're most likely in the chase.
You would think so.
No,
yeah, well, that's right. That's right. It's automatic. That's right. Yeah, I'm just, my first instinct is to say, well, that would give me a good chance. But you're absolutely right. It would be automatic at that point.
Right. And if you can get that out of a third round pick, you expect it out of the first and second round.
You do.
You expect once you get to the third round, it's kind of sketchy.
It is. It is. But, yeah, to be able to get that in the third round with the upside that he has, I am happy. The picks that will end the third round and start the fourth round for Nate Noy, it is Austin Dillon and Casey Kane. Austin Dillon last year finishing 14th, a breakthrough year for him, making the chase, coming off of 21st and 20th place finishes the previous 2 years. 16th on the intermediate course races last year, 3rd on restrictor plates, 11th on the short tracks, 1st on the super speedways. Nobody did it better on average finishes than him, not in the top 20 on road courses. Casey Kane, another one of these guys of like, wasn't he supposed to have broken through by now? 17th last year, 18th the year before, 15th in 2014, making the chase that year. 12th last year in intermediate course races, not in the top 20 on restrictor plates or super speedways, tied for 6th on the short tracks, 12th on the road courses. Austin Dillon, Casey Kane, at the risk of being just a little bit too glib here, you look at the trajectory of an Austin Dillon, and maybe it's a little bit of a cautionary tale when you look at the next pick here of Casey Kane, because if you don't take the next step forward, if you're Austin Dillon, then you turn into Casey Kane. Do you not?
Not when Grandpa runs the team.
All right, so we got time here then, huh?
We have time.
Okay.
There. Casey Kane, on the other hand,
I
think time is going to be knocking on his door because so much was expected out of him when he first signed.
Yep.
And it just hasn't. I mean, it hasn't come to him.
Right.
So I think he could be on his last legs. I think if Team Hendrick had somebody that they could replace him with, they would.
Yeah.
I just don't. I just think right now, I think he's on his last legs with Hendrick.
That's one of
even
those
with
things.
a win.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
that.
Very possibly. And you look at his career, and you go back to that whole Yogi Berra thing of it's getting late kind of early out here, and that's how it kind of looks. And yet, it's interesting. You look at the field, beginning of the fourth round, and again, I'd be the last person to dismiss this since he's going off of the FDH draft board here, but for all this that we're saying about Casey Kane, it's far more, I think, a function of making a pick when you are, at this point, you've had now 16 picks. That's the 16th pick overall, and he was the 15th pick on the FDH draft board. So for everything we're saying, I think it's far more a function of you're rolling the dice at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely.
There aren't enough drivers yet left for you not to. Another guy here, very, very interesting, is that I will be going with Ryan Newman for my next pick. Another guy who, again, has not probably overall had the kind of career that people envisioned that he would have. A disappointing 18th place finish last year, so I am buying low to be sure. 11th in 2015, 2nd in 2014, which is about as good as it's gotten for him. 14th on the intermediate course races last year, 12th on restrictor plates, 17th on short tracks, 16th on super speedways, 10th on road courses. So whatever else you want to say about the guy and the kind of year that he had, he did finish in the top 17th or better on all track types, 14th on the intermediates, which are the most important ones. So for Ryan Newman, it's another one here where I think there's at least a solid floor for what he can do. That's why I like the pick here in the fourth round. Maybe a little bit of upside to grow beyond that. I mean, not the upside of being a serious contender, I don't think. Although, again, he will only be 3 years off of a second-place finish. But, unless he gets hurt like Dale Earnhardt Jr. did last year, which is always the variable that comes into this thing. Barring something completely out of left field, he's probably not going to underperform where he's getting taken at, I wouldn't think.
I don't think so. And the one thing about Ryan Newman, he is so aggressive on pole day that you get a couple of poles out of Ryan Newman, and he starts up front, and maybe that'll get you a few extra top 10s, top 5s.
Well, you talk about being aggressive on pole day.
No.
For this next pick, we might have to ask.
That was my line.
We might have to ask Ricky Stenhouse Jr. the extent to which that's the case, because he's the only guy in NASCAR that would probably know this. Because I know you saw where Anthony was going with this next one here. A very interesting pick for Anthony, Danica Patrick. in the middle of the fourth round, I'd have to go through and see. This is probably the highest she's ever been taken. And again, Anthony, with his specialized criteria of liking drivers that he thinks are going to race more to the system this year, or that are going to race more to the system in a easily achievable kind of a way, I'm very intrigued because there's nothing I see in her track record that points it out. This is another one of these picks where I'll be very anxious to talk to somebody after the show. She was 24th in the standings the last 2 years, 28th in 2014. So to go here in this spot, 18th overall, would be a jump up, a significant jump up from what she's done before. 20th on the intermediate course races last year, 18th on the short tracks, 19th on the road courses, not in the top 20 average finish on restrictor plates or super speedways. The super speedway one kind of surprises me given her background in open wheel. But anyways, looking at this here, again, I'm at a loss for what Anthony was thinking, but how do you see it playing out?
She's hot.
But can we be honest?
I had her last year. I think I took her in round 5 or 6.
Can we be honest, like on the sports curve?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like I always say, compared to like Ashley Force, get out of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Give me any of the Force daughters. Which, by the way, didn't one of the Force daughters marry somebody from? It was who did she marry? It was one of the Indy drivers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One of the. God, I'm blowing it right now. Graham Rahal.
Really?
Like, you talk about, yeah, it's like, when I first saw that, I was just like, that's going to rival, like, the Agassi, Steffi Graf kind of a thing as far as, like, the offspring, albeit you're talking open wheel and you're talking drag racing. So who's to say what the kid's going to come out being good at? It could be that he's not good enough at one or the other. It could be a weird genetic kind of a thing. Or he might be the greatest. Maybe he'll race 2 different circuits and be the greatest of all time. You just never know.
You don't.
Yeah. But with Danica here at this point, and it's very funny because Anthony had Ricky Stenhouse like 1 pick behind her on his draft board. So that just makes me laugh. Again, and that's not a common thing either, because I think most people, we pretty much every year have had Ricky Stenhouse Jr. a little bit ahead of her, because we're getting to that point in time, we're starting to get to where each of them would be drafted. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in this spot would probably be less of a surprise. She is certainly, I think, more of a surprise.
I agree, yeah.
So we'll have to see. He obviously thinks she's going to race more to the type of system here this year, but I have my doubts. We come now to your next selection, and I'll be very curious to see who you add to the Busch brothers and Denny Hamlin.
Well, who you have here at 17 and 18, it could go either way.
Okay. But do you agree with me that there's a cutoff after those guys?
I do.
Okay.
I do. So, that being said,
you got a good chance of getting both of them because you got Matt in the middle.
Yeah.
And Matt just loves to throw curveballs.
This is very true, and I can't see Matt's board from where I'm sitting here.
I'll be honest with you.
So
I shouldn't ruin the suspense, but it doesn't matter who you take because I'm looking at Matt's guys. Matt's going to get 2 guys that are completely different than the guys you're looking at. So whoever you think is the better value in this spot, whoever you think as our editor for motorsports would be a better pick, go ahead.
I mean,
and pick them.
they're very, So I'll just. Based off what we talked about off your board and what we talked about prior to this, and I didn't make any changes, I didn't suggest anything,
That's
on
generally
the final
how
draft.
it goes.
Yeah.
I do the first draft, I submit it to you, we kind of go through it a little bit.
And it's nothing ever major, maybe
yeah.
it's a here or there, but
because you and I are pretty much like a mind meld on this kind of stuff generally.
So I'll just right now it's just like when you get to this point in the draft, it's like you just. Can they get a win somehow? Can they sneak one in? Just to get some points, a top 10 or whatnot.
Right.
So I will take Ryan Blaney.
All right, Ryan Blaney. We talk about bloodlines and not dominant bloodlines with NASCAR, but nonetheless, he finished 20th on the series last year. He was 17th on the UQB. He was 17th on the intermediate races, which, of course, influenced that strongly. Tied for 7th on restrictor plate courses, 8th on super speedways, not in the top 20 average finish for short tracks or road tracks. Ryan Blaney, again, at this point in time here, young upside. But again, I would say that's good to be getting in the late 4th round here. As somebody who can probably, shoot to that point in time here. He finished 20th a year ago. You're getting him with the 19th pick. He's not likely to be appreciably worse than that and has a chance to do better than that, I would think.
Yeah, we can always hope.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at, and it's funny because with Matt being up next, you said you thought and agreed with my call on the FDH draft board that there was a drop-off after the 17th and 18th guys. And what's funny is the first guy that Matt had up on his list was the number 19 guy. So somebody that you and I had slotted below this point, but not appreciably below, but underneath a line of cutoff here. Chris Buescher is the pick. He finished 16th a year ago, and again, did not place in the top 20 on any average track types last year. So he's a guy who didn't have any kind of real great strengths to his game, but managed to make it into the chase nonetheless, and you got to take your hat off to him for that.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how the Patron brothers do. It'll be very, very interesting.
Yes, it will, won't it?
Sundays at the Patron residence.
Yes.
Boy, that would be a great reality show.
There's any number of things that would be a great reality show. I mean, I know it's already being done with like Storage Wars and stuff, like with these guys going to auctions and stuff. I mean, hit me up, Hollywood. We could put some cameras on these guys. They are entertaining, naturally entertaining fellas. There's money to be made.
There is. Just
add
alcohol?
There is. Add alcohol to the mix. These guys, I love them to death. They are entertaining as hell. There is money to be made. You were absolutely right about that. And I would love to be the guy exploiting it, to be perfectly honest with you. So.
And so if it does come to fruition, remember whose idea this
was.
was.
Yes. We're giving you an executive producer credit for that one alone. But I don't even know what's the best direction to go in. Put a camera on them watching NASCAR. Put a camera on them. I've been to auctions with them and had a lot of fun. There was one time in particular where I went with them, and it was the winter time, and it was like, this seems like the things that could only happen with certain people. Like it just had nothing to do with them, but I was there with them, and there's a guy, and he's wearing like a winter coat and whatever, and it was kind of like, part of the way zipped up, and didn't have a shirt on underneath, like a middle-aged fat guy. I was like,
I swear it wasn't me.
It wasn't you, but it was something that just kind of made us laugh. Like I never fail to have an entertaining time hanging out with those guys. And again, Hollywood, money to be made with that. Let's get a reality show going. Let other people enjoy the fun vicariously of hanging out with these guys as we have gotten to do over a period of time. Why should we be selfish with the fun? The next pick here for Matt Patron, he goes Daniel Suarez with his pick. So just going for a newbie getting thrown into the mix here and figuring that he's going to have a good infrastructure behind him. And I think there are probably good reasons to suspect that will be the case.
That's a nice pick right there. I give him props.
It's definitely an upside pick, right?
Absolutely. If that would have just rounded out Anthony's team very well.
Yes, it would have. Very much in fitting. Although, again, he took Ty Dillon in the second round. So, he's swinging from the heels a decent amount himself. But any particular thoughts on how you think he might fare this year? It's hard to guess a floor or a ceiling for him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it really is. You just got to take a look at his teammates, the team that he's with, and, Gibbs is a first-class organization.
Right.
So, that being said, working with Gibbs, I think he'll do better than most.
Right.
And if that's a way to tap dance around that answer, I don't know what is.
Well, I mean, that's all you can really cite, though. I mean, in fairness, is you look at what he's going to have there, what Gibbs is going to give him. That's all you really kind of have to go on, because it's like when you're assessing, as you and I do frequently, you say with like baseball prospects, for example. I mean, you can look at what the guy did at Double-A last year and what a breakthrough it was, but it tells you nothing about how quickly they're going to be ready for the big league pitching. So I think that's the only thing that we have to look at. Your next pick, again, not much of a surprise.
It's not as easy as you think.
Not as easy? All right,
no.
Explain.
Well, sometimes you have your heart.
Okay.
And, sometimes you draft with your heart.
Okay.
And, there's a driver out there who it wouldn't be a huge reach.
Mm-hmm.
that, in my heart, I'm like, man, I really like this guy, and he's won races in the past, and he's got this personality that draws you to him.
Mm-hmm.
That is not making it easy, but yeah, I'm still going to take Jamie McMurray, because this isn't about drafting with your heart.
Right.
I've done that before with Dale Earnhardt Jr. how many times?
Right.
This isn't about drafting with your heart. This is, okay, what is best? What is going to win me a championship?
What is, in the words of a man who a good friend of ours works for, what is best for business?
Exactly.
You're looking at it that way.
Yes.
And, again, you look at the last couple of years here, you've taken a guy here with the 22nd pick who has really outshone that draft position the last couple of years. 15th on the UQB last year, and you look at the consistency of it for where he's being taken. 15th on intermediate courses, 14th on restrictor plates, 9th on short tracks, 17th on super speedways, 11th on road courses, 13th place finish the last 2 years in the final standings. So he made the chase the last 2 years, 18th the year before. You're getting him here with the 22nd pick. That's value, my friend. He was 18th on the FDA's draft board.
Yeah, it's value, but like I said, sometimes you just kind of look, and I'm sure he's not going to last to me in the 6th round, who it is, but you'll know.
Right.
And it wouldn't surprise me. Who's up next?
Well, and it is funny with Anthony, because on the whole keeping it in the family thing here, not exactly the same kind of keeping it in the family thing here, unless you're one of these perverts tooling around on the deep web for other types of videos involving the Bush brothers. But keeping it in the family here for Anthony involves taking Ricky Stenhouse Jr. as his 5th round pick to complement the misses in the 4th round. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was the very next one up on his draft board, and it was only a question of whether anybody in between would have him slotted high enough, and the answer was no.
So Danica was on top of Ricky Stenhouse?
Yes. Yeah.
On the draft board?
Not on our draft board, but on Anthony's draft board. So the headline takeaway for Anthony, if we're to sum up his 4th and 5th round picks, is Danica's on top. So we'll just leave it at that. Stenhouse, the last couple of years, pretty consistent. 21st last year, 25th in 2015, 27th in 2014. So he's been about in that range and making incremental jumps up the last couple of years. 18th last year on the intermediate course races, 10th on restrictor plates, 20th on short tracks, tied for 5th on super speedways, and not in the top 20 average finish on road courses. And somebody that came into the series a couple of years ago with some degree of hype behind him, having done very well on the feeder system races here coming into NASCAR. Somebody who hasn't gotten to this point yet, but not like a Joey Logano where he came in with the level of hype of like, OMG, he could win it his first year. For the level of hype that he had coming in, for the incremental growth that he's shown thus far, he's probably been about appropriate to it, but he's going to have to make a step up into the teens one of these years if he's going to ultimately reach that point. There has to be a stepping stone year for him. If it's a stepping stone year for him in that sense, if he makes, I don't think they're calling it the chase anymore, but if he gets in there and is able to make some noise in the tail end of the season, then this will be a great value pick for Anthony if that happens.
Right. I mean, now looking back at this, you can start to see the rise of Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and I don't want to demise is the wrong word, but the downside of Roush Fenway Racing.
Right.
It all seems to have coincided. They lost Edwards. They lost Kenseth. So, and Roush Fenway was the main team that Ford was putting their money behind.
That's right.
Between them and Penske was flip-flopping between, Dodge, Ford. They were going back and forth.
Right.
So I think the fact that, he didn't have anybody really to work with because two of the biggest stars on the whole Ford team kind of left. And then, that being said, then the Roush Fenway team began to slide, and you were putting all your eggs in the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. basket.
Right. So it's been an interesting sort of trajectory as far as how his career has gone, and have to see again. This kind of needs to be a year for him to really kind of make a move, and if he's able to do that, he'll really overshoot the mark for Anthony and give him great value. That's going to bring it to my next pick here, which is going to be, of course, the highest one available on the FDH draft board, 20th on that board, and I am getting him right now with the 24th pick, so I'm liking that. A.J. Allmendinger, and another guy who has done decent but not great to this point in his career. 19th last year, 22nd in 2015, 13th, a chase year for him in 2014, kind of his high water mark thus far. 19th on the intermediate course races last year, 15th on restrictor plates, 12th on the short tracks, tied for 9th on the super speedways, tied for 5th on the road courses. He's a guy who, as he has grown, has gotten to have some better average finishes on just not just the kind of tracks that he raced on an open wheel, but he has sort of diversified his game across the board. Limited growth to this point in time here, but there's probably still some room for him. I would like to hope optimistically with him on my team for him to take another step forward.
Yeah, nice pick right there. Very
Thank you.
nice.
Thank you.
And and he's always been consistent on, he may not always show it, but sometimes people just say, okay, road courses, there's where I can count on a couple of top 5s, top 10s out of Allmendinger.
That's right. I think people tend to see it that way, and I think that's how he generally has been known to step up more so than in even other areas. The next pick's for Nate. Nate is going to round out his team altogether with Trevor Bayne and with Clint Boyer.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, and Clint Boyer as the last pick on the 4th tier of drivers for FDH. So I kind of get boned a little bit on that one pick in front of me, because according to the draft board, there's something of a drop-off. Trevor Bayne and then Clint Boyer. Boyer's another guy who, again, there were greater expectations at one point in his career. 27th last year. That was kind of rock bottom. 16th in 2015, 19th in 2014. And for Trevor Bayne, again, it's always been that one defining moment that he's hoping to get past at some point here, of just having been, I don't want to say a fluke winner at the Daytona 500, but one of the more unexpected ones. He hasn't really had a follow-up act since then. 22nd last year, 29th in 2015. Was not a full-time driver in 2014. So your thoughts on Bayne and Boyer to end it for Nate?
Yeah, Nate, such a solid team. I mean, right now, looking at his team, you can't find much fault with it.
No, you probably can't.
Yeah. Trevor Bayne, you hope that he can find, that second win, which would probably just vault him.
Yeah.
Clint Boyer, that was the one guy I was thinking about taking ahead of Jamie McMurray.
Okay.
He's going to Stuart Haas.
Mm-hmm.
He raced for Michael Waltrip last year, which folded.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have so much better equipment.
Right.
And you just look at the teammates he's going to have. I think, again, would it surprise me if Clint Boyer won a race this year? No, not at all. He's got better equipment than he had last year. He's got better teammates than he had last year. He's working with Ford, and this is Ford's #1 team again. And to get a guy on a top-flight team this late in the draft is outstanding.
Well, and this is one of these things, too, and this is where I take my hat off to Anthony for trying to anticipate on this kind of stuff here, because there are things that guys have done well. A lot of the guys that are going 4th, 5th, 6th round, and I say guys to include Danica, drivers, that they've led at key points in the race. Well, if you're leading at the right point in the race, you're going to win the first stage or the second stage. You don't even have to win a race. It's not now all or nothing the way that it was. These things before, where it was like, they had a really good day, I'm not going to get the points out of it commensurate to what a day it was. Well, now you may get the points out of it commensurate to what it was. It wasn't a win, but you got a stage maybe.
Right.
And that's going to mean something. So, but we're in uncharted territory trying to figure that one out, I think.
Right.
So somebody like Boyer seems likely to get at least that point. My last pick is going to be Eric Almirola, and a guy who not going in the right direction relative to where he was in the previous 2 years, but if he gets back to where he was the previous 2 years, it'll be a value. 26th last year, 17th in 2015, 16th in 2014. He made the chase that year. So if Almirola can bounce back at all, I'm getting some value here.
Yeah, if he can.
What do you think his odds are?
when you're getting this late, everything's a coin toss.
Okay.
They're
I won't get my hopes up.
Didn't say that, but
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not expecting you to wildly put over my last round pick, so I'll live. Anthony's last round pick is going to be Paul Menard, and that is an interesting one. Another guy who, again, had a drop off but has been in the chase. Guys who've been in the chase going in the last round here, which is what's interesting. 25th last year, 14th, and in the chase in 2015, and 21st in 2014. So, thoughts on Paul Menard?
He's had up and down races, up and down years. It's hard to put a finger on Paul Menard. He's not very consistent.
Yeah. But so he's got a chance maybe to steal one here as we go along.
Same with Almirola.
Yeah, you would think so. But we go now to the last two picks of the draft here, and what you do is going to possibly influence the last pick here, because I know who Matt is going to go with off of his draft board if you don't take him. So we're looking at all guys left here on the FDH draft board that are among our sixth tier of drivers, and we're in the sixth round, fittingly.
I'll just go right off the draft board and take Landon Castle.
All right. 29th last year, another one of the this new generation, the young bloods in NASCAR. What do you like about him? What do you think about him?
I didn't want to pronounce Stella Badobo.
Or Di Benedetto, as the case may be.
Him too.
Yeah.
Castle, much easier to pronounce. No, yeah, he's part of the young bloods, and like I says, when you're getting to this late into the draft, you're just kind of hoping.
Right. Well, the funny thing is here, the last pick that was made by Matt only went, and I can break kayfabe by saying this now, 17 down on his draft board. So when I refer to his draft board in the last round, he was going to defer to Anthony here in the last round. Matt actually got all five of his first 5 round guys out of his top 17 overall because he was going off the board. All of them were gone. Daniel Suarez was the last one. He said defer to Anthony's board for however many rounds as possible. I would have thought that would have been 2 rounds minimum, but it ends up being 1 round. Anthony makes the pick for Matt of David Reagan, who, again, 33rd last year. And as far as just what to think about him, I mean, I don't mean to be mean, but kind of like he is what he is kind of what comes to my mind.
Yeah, I mean, he replaced Dale Jarrett in the UPS car years ago, and he never quite lived up to the hype.
Yeah.
Again, huge shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Kind of impossible. And, you're getting them right here for a reason.
Well, and that's the whole thing here, too. I think in football coaching, it tends to go that way, that, replacing Bear Bryant at Alabama, it's easier to be the guy replacing the guy. And to whatever extent, doesn't that say a lot for Chase Elliott driving the 24 car and doing as well as he did? It is so hard to be the guy following the guy.
Absolutely. But the one thing Chase has in its favor, it's still the 24 car, but it's not the same sponsor.
True. Yeah, there is a little bit of a difference there, and that makes it a little bit easier. The 5 teams that we have, Matt Patrone, who picked first overall, goes with Jimmy Johnson, Ty Dillon, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Chris Buescher, Daniel Suarez, David Reagan. You, Mike, ended up with the Busch brothers in the first 2 rounds, Kyle, then Kurt, Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, Jamie McMurray, London Castle. Anthony Patrone with Martin Truex Jr., Chase Elliott, Eric Jones, Danica Patrick, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Paul Menard. I, Rick Morris, with Joey Logano, Matt Kenseth, Kyle Larson, Ryan Newman, A.J. Allmendinger, Eric Almirola, Nate Noy with Kevin Harvick, Brad Keselowski, Austin Dillon, Casey Kane, Trevor Bayne, Clint Boyer. Thoughts on how the teams shake up?
You got to love Nate's team. I really love, especially his first 2 picks.
Yeah, it's he might have the highest floor for his team, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I very, very possibly. I'm liking how I came out of it.
Oh, absolutely.
I think you came out of it strong. Anthony and Matt rolled the dice in a few places. And, again, we know with Anthony it was a question of methodology. He is brave enough. I give him credit for guts. Guts to him for trying to figure in how drivers are going to do based on the new system and weighting his board, and I would say weighting his board moderately heavy in that direction. Matt, I'm not as clear on the methodology of, but again, there are a number of things that I've said along the way that could come off as a little bit dismissive of some of Matt's picks, but he's the defending champion. So if you're going to give credence to anybody taking risks, and he's taking risks, the defending champion, you got to give him somewhat of the benefit of the doubt at least.
Absolutely.
So we'll see how it plays out. But the one thing that was not a risk, that was not something that was up in the air was, again, having fun doing this with you, having it be a blast, and having it turn out to be a great show. That is always 100% guaranteed. So as always, Mike Petak, our NASCAR, actually motorsports overall, our motorsports editor at FDH, always a pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for being a part of this, my friend.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. And thank you, everybody, for checking us out here in the FDH Lounge and the FantasyDraftHelp.com Insider.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the Periodic Table of Elements.